Welcome to the fourth episode of Millennial Pagan Podcast, the podcast that's quickly becoming a voice to the growing number of millennial pagans and our brand of witchcraft, magic, practice, and worship. We are your hosts, Autumn Wolf.
And Jera Stone. How you doing, Autumn?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
I've been doing pretty good. Been pretty active lately.
Yeah.
Yeah, just got back from Phoenix Comic Fest.
Right.
Which was amazing.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And you did a couple of cosplays, which went over well, I hear.
Yep, and my feet are still killing me.
I believe it. Well, I have some pleasant news myself. I got a promotion that also involved a raise and much better days off.
Nice. Well, congratulations.
Thank you. So today's episode, we're going to be discussing a topic that's recently been on the lips of major names in paganism and in cult news, the teacher-student relationship. Today we're going to be talking about the recent drama, previous issues, and how to avoid them. But first, I want to let our listeners know that some of this content is going to be triggering to some people. We are going to be talking about some abuses that teachers do commit, stories about teachers and other active members of the pagan community committing such abuses, very similar to, of course, other abuses in different churches, as well as other communities. So if that doesn't sound great to you, go ahead and skip this episode. Do realize I am a criminologist. I'm very desensitized to this sort of thing. And I had to stop halfway through my research yesterday when I was just wrapping up because I couldn't reread something. It was too heavy for me. So, I mean, if you're a very sensitive person with that kind of thing, maybe skip this one.
Yeah, we do understand that this can be triggering for some people, and we don't want to trigger anybody when it comes to this type of stuff. So we understand if you guys decide to skip this one, just know that we'll be back with a little bit more of a lighthearted show the next episode.
Yes, our next episode will be much lighter. Just to give a little bit more of a caveat, we're going to be not discussing the victims' names. We're just going to be talking about teachers and certain types of abuse. The point of this episode isn't just to highlight the negative. It's to give a little bit of a warning to new students and to teachers about what could go wrong and why.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll start with the most recent things that's been going on. The one that started kind of this whole discussion in the pagan verse recently has been the issue with Jessica Matthews, or Yiddish Rabbit. She was the high priestess of the Come As You Are Coven, or pagan congregation. It is considered a matriarchal, eclectic, interfaith congregation, and it's located in San Francisco. She was also at one point working for the Wild Hunt News, which is the major pagan news outlet out there. And so a lot of people started kind of coming out and saying that she was abusing her power. How she was abusing it a lot of the times was described as emotional, physical, some sexual abuse, and a lot of transphobia. And so a lot of people were coming out as students, former students, and other members of the Come As You Are Coven and saying, this is what's happening to me. The Coven itself had an established way of handling this in an internal investigation. A lot of her victims are claiming that the way that she was originally investigated the first time these allegations came about was very, how you put it,
It wasn't right. Like it wasn't in depth enough.
Well, it was very partial to her.
Ah.
She was the priestess for a very long time, and a lot of people were definitely on her side. From the way it was described in a couple of different things I read, a couple of different victim statements, that she groomed people very well. I actually read from a couple of people that said if you weren't with her, you were against her, and she would make a lot of negative plights against you. A couple of big names have come forward and were like, yeah, this actually happened. It happened to me. So
that's just unbelievable that it would happen, that something like this would happen in in any community.
This is actually kind of tamed compared to what I've
Yeah.
read.
Oh, really?
Which is really sad. So during the investigation, one of the reasons this became a big issue is because Jessica resigned while under investigation, and that caused the Coven to put her in not good standing. She also left the San Francisco Bay Area, and a lot of people kind of either took the two sides. It drew a pretty big line in the sand because she's still teaching, she's still showing up to events and things, but a lot of people don't know whose side to be on.
Right.
Actually, if in our show notes, you'll have the article there that the Wild Hunt posted. They specifically said that they had somebody come in and read what they posted to make sure that it was impartial. But to me, there was no victim statements. It was very loose on actual facts, and it did sound very partial. I mean, it's hard to say, hey, this person who used to work with us and left us in good standing is now obviously a predator or an abuser, when they don't have it all because they're not in that specific coven. But at the same time, victims have come forward and said that we told the Wild Hunt X, Y, and Z, and they used none of it. And they didn't even use all the facts that they could have.
So it was very, very biased to serve her agenda.
I wouldn't say very, very biased. The first time I read it, I didn't read anything wrong, but that was my first just quick glance at it and not doing any real research into it.
Right.
A lot of the ways that people who were Jessica's victims describe the way that she handled things was if you were accomplishing something. When somebody published a book, who was one of her students, she's like, oh, well, you did that good deed through my light because I influenced you. That's why you're successful.
So she was taking credit for
Very
other
much so.
people's accomplishments.
Yes, very much so. And she would also say, you need my blessing on this project. So one person who wrote a book that was specifically supposed to be for men of paganism said that she pretty much forced her way into his foreword, saying, well, you need a woman's blessing on this if it's going to be pagan.
Wow, that's...
Yep.
I'm kind of flabbergasted at that.
I am too. But I mean, it kind of shows she left the San Francisco Bay Area. I mean, I think she knows who's right and who's wrong, and I think the victims do too. But this was one of the first in this year, I'd say maybe scandals.
Yeah.
Yeah, almost a scandal.
Yeah, that would be a very appropriate word for it.
But yeah, there's not a whole lot of facts other than obviously that's a lot of emotional abuse right there. Kind of inserting yourself in that person's life and saying that all your positive things are because I'm involved. But I did not read a whole lot of the physical. I guess she would be very pushy, probably, or aggressive. I know a lot of people who will like do the smack as joking, but kind of it makes people think and speak in specific ways in that person's presence.
Right.
I do not know what the sexual abuse entails. We'll talk more about people who have been found to do sexual abuses upon students and teachers. And so we'll kind of look at what kind of sexual abuses do happen in the pagan community, but I don't know what specifically she did.
Right.
The transphobia is actually quite obvious, though. A group that is in the San Francisco Bay Area that specifically talks about and hosts space for the LGBT community, pagan community, at first a few years ago posted an article saying, we believe that Rabbit is definitely a ally, and we haven't heard any of these disparaging comments that people are saying she made. And then after this big scandal hit, they changed their statement saying, in light of victim statements, we're going to have to react what we said before.
Yeah, would need to resend it.
Resend it, yeah.
Yeah, just, I mean, and that's kind of sad because, I mean, we have a couple of people that we know that are trans, that are LGBTQ in our community out here in Arizona, and for a lot of them, it's a huge safe haven, and to have somebody of massive influence like that be phobic to anything like that is not it's not something that should happen.
Well, that's not the first time.
Well, yeah.
I think it was 2 years ago, Z Budapest was hosting a women's ritual at PantheaCon, and she turned around and her group said, okay, this women's ritual is for real women, and meaning that anyone who was trans from male to female wasn't invited in that space. It wasn't invited in any of their female only spaces, actually.
Wow.
And it became a big deal. People were turning around who were dear friends of her and saying, whoa, that's not what we're okay with.
Yeah.
And so it became a big scandal. She turned around and she did make an apology saying maybe I should have made that more known before PantheaCon, not just at PantheaCon, but I thought people knew that was my feelings.
Yeah, that's something that, I mean, if you're going to create an event or something like that, a gathering that does entail that type of thing. I mean, kind of like what we were talking about during the last episode about getting the information out there as to what's going to be involved. I think that's something that that should happen in every community.
I agree.
Because, I mean, if this person was of that mindset but doesn't let that know and something like that happens, yeah, that's what creates scandals.
Mm-hmm. That was one.
Yeah.
So the other one that just recently cleared up was with Storm Fairy Wolf. And on May 8th, he made a statement that he was aware that somebody was accusing him of sexual misconduct. And I'll be flat out. I am friends with Storm on Facebook. I have I have one of, soon a couple of Storm's books. And I'm friends with his two mates as well on Facebook. So I kind of got it as it came out and got to read it for that first glance as it went by. So what happened was this gentleman who lived in Maryland was accusing Storm, who lives in San Francisco, of sexual misconduct. And he was doing it, as we found out, because he had started becoming involved in a fairy group in Maryland that wasn't approving of Storm's publishing of his books because he was giving away not secrets but knowledge in the books. This gentleman, who was Echo Pup Roberts, did recant his statements. What his statements were specifically were about initiation rites. And he said that Storm required when you complete an initiation for unprotected sex, to my knowledge. Mm-hmm. Now, there's also some things written that said Echo Pup was also offering students lessons and requiring that as part of their initiation as well. Storm's specific statement on it was that not only does that go against fairy tradition because it causes harm, it goes against what he as a gay man believes because it is definitely a unsafe practice.
Right.
That was pretty much the start of it. Again, Echo Pup did recant his statement in a very long Facebook post, which you can only find through a link through the Wild Hunts page. And the Wild Hunt page will also be part of the show notes for anybody to do their own research on.
This is actually the first I've heard of this situation.
Yeah, it was actually pretty big. So the first time Storm really mentioned that this is what's going on, I would never do that, mostly because he was a victim of Gabriel Carlello, who was the founder of Blood Rose Fairy. Mm-hmm. I did not get to really look into what kind of misconducts that he created, but obviously it would have been something if Storm felt so comfortable to say, hey, this is what happened to me.
Right.
Of course, Devin Hunter, who is his spouse, came out and said, yep, no, he would have never done that. He refused to teach me fairy when I started out because we were in a relationship. Chase, their other spouse, also said this is total false. Other people came out and also supported Storm, saying he would never have done this. And then there was also a small faction of people who were like, I have no goodwill with Storm, and I can't agree. And then there was also one person who was helping push this all around. And that person also made a big apology and was pretty honest about the fact that he was friends with Echo Pup on Facebook. Echo Pup even mentioned this person through his apology. This person has been known to be a whistleblower in fairy tradition on people that cause abuses. And that's Oberon Cunning. His first, or the first one I could find, a whistleblowing issue was with Saber Benjamin Sangral. And I will use that name a couple of times because this is important. Oberon first met him through training with Teethorn Coil. Teethorn Coils also made her own statement about this problem. Oberon mentioned that when he first met this person, it was online. And he was friends with this person, Benjamin, for about 10 plus years before meeting him in person. When he met him in person, after becoming intoxicated and spending an evening being intoxicated, Benjamin made mention that when he had offspring, he intended to initiate them through sexual rites himself. Oberon was obviously uncomfortable by that.
Yeah.
As everybody should be.
Exactly.
And there was a couple of other things that were not okay. Oberon, being at the time about to become a father, was like, okay, no, this person's not who I thought this was. Benjamin at that time was planning to move from Illinois to California, to San Francisco. And when he did so, he then became part of the reclaiming tradition in San Francisco. He became a teacher at a reclaiming teens camp. At one point after going to that camp, he invited Oberon over to his home and told him that he had met a specific teenager there that he was very interested in and had already set up a meeting with. This is called grooming.
Yeah.
Oberon then turned around and informed the reclaiming tradition. The reclaiming tradition obviously informed that teenager's parent. Benjamin never got to that teenager.
Good.
That teenager was safe. Benjamin Sangrel left reclaiming and started joining Fairy. At the time, he then became a father. And as his partner was pregnant, Oberon was like, okay, we're having some problems. I need to inform the fairy community, because he was part of the fairy community. He's like, this guy is a predator. This guy is not good news. So he put a message out on the fairy community page. This is what I know. This is the facts of what I know. Be careful around this guy. And because of that, he also informed Benjamin's midwife, because it was the midwife that him and his wife used. And she then set up a meeting with Benjamin's partner and tried to inform her, hey, this is what this guy has promised to do to your child. Get him out of your life.
Yeah.
It did not work. She was under the impression through what Benjamin was telling her that fairy tradition was the ones that were interested in doing those things. And it became a court case. They went to paternity court over it, and Benjamin Seagrell lost custody of his child right after birth because of his own way of acting at the birth. And sadly, the child was then returned to its mother and lasted 2 months before passing.
Oh.
Then Benjamin Sangrel and his partner left California and went back to Illinois. He then became a photographer for a middle school.
Okay, now that's shocking.
He was arrested and convicted of child pornography for taking images of underage males in the school restroom urinating. In Illinois, he was released in 2015 because natural urination is not considered pornography in Illinois. Be aware of this guy if you are in Illinois.
Yeah.
These are facts that you can prove through San Francisco and Illinois court cases of what he has done. These are not questionable. These are not things that I am accusing him of doing that I can be sued for. These are proven facts in courts of law.
Yeah.
He has done X, Y, and Z. Whether that is considered criminal or not is not up to me. I am not the justice system.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I do want to mention that isn't really attached to that case but did happen was certain members of the fairy tradition then released to the courts not public transcripts and names of members of the fairy tradition. When you use your name in a group, be aware sometimes when these kind of things happen, you might be outed.
Yeah.
It is scary. It is a violation of your trust, but it might happen. So with that, I want to thank Oberon Cunning for his bravery in whistleblowing Benjamin Sangrella. I also want to thank him for making a public apology to somebody he doesn't really like as a person, and stepping aside and saying, you know, I took somebody's word on faith and I spread this around, and I'm sorry for what it did to you. Because of a lot of what was said about Storm, he lost some business, obviously.
Yeah.
Him and his spouses own a store. He's a published author. You can lose business. Your whole reputation can be destroyed for a false accusation. But at the same time, Jessica Matthews deserves her reputation to be tarnished.
Yeah.
Even if all she did was emotional abuse, she doesn't deserve to be a teacher anymore. So another recent one, I kind of forgot it was this recent because he was originally found with the illegal activity in 2015. Kenny Kennel was sentenced just in April to 12 years of prison for convicted child pornography, specifically 1 count of pornography involving a juvenile under 13 and 19 counts of pornography with the intent to distribute of any child under the age of 17. Kenny Clent was a folk musician, published author, and an elder in the Blue Star tradition of Wicca. Took 2 years to finally convict him, but it took 3 days of trial. So, kind of a victory.
Kind of, yeah.
Slight victory.
Well, you know, sometimes it's the small victories that lead to the bigger ones.
Well, if he had 19 counts of intent to distribute, then maybe he knows how he got them and can call out the bigger rings.
Yep.
Little fish, big fish. Let's just get them all.
Yeah.
So a more historical note is Gavin and Yvonne Frost. Now I'm going to tread a little lightly because these Gavin has already passed away, so slight respect to the dead. Mm-hmm. And Yvonne is still among us and still threatening to sue anybody who disparages their credibility. Gavin and Yvonne were the founders of the Church and School of Wicca, which started in 1969. They are authors of the Witch's Bible, which was republished into the Good Witch's Bible. And the reason why we're talking about them is they have an initiation rite that encourages, well, pedophilia and incest.
Yeah, no.
Right. So let's start with Gavin and Yvonne had, in the 60s and on, stated a lot of homophobic rants and such, saying that anybody of LGBT does not belong in Wicca. So going back to that specifically, we obviously don't agree.
Yeah, no, not at all.
I could see when you have traditional Wicca in that sense that maybe that would be your feelings. Gavin and Yvonne also both disagree that Gerald Gardner was the founder of Wicca and that Raymond Buckland brought it over to America. They say they're the founders.
So they're taking the credit.
Yes.
Okay.
And telling every historian that they're wrong. So this initiation rite, it is republished in the Good Witch's Bible, 1999. And some of the wording is specifically, physical attributes of reproduction are present, meaning that's how you determine when this initiation rite should start. Mm-hmm. Physical attributes of reproduction are present.
So pretty much menstrual cycle.
Yes. Or other male aspects.
Yes.
What age were you when you started puberty?
13.
I was 11.
Yeah,
That is a child.
that is.
So, once these attributes are visible, the child is given a sponsor. Usually the sponsor is somebody who is new to the coven. That's even scarier.
Yeah.
Or, well, newest person of the opposite sex to the coven. Let's highlight, again, their homophobia.
Yeah.
Unless that person is of an extreme age different to the child or physically extremely different. Like an extremely large male with a very tiny 12-year-old.
Yeah.
So when this starts, the female is given 2, they say, sacred phalluses. Let's be honest, dildos.
Mm-hmm.
An 11-year-old is given 2 dildos to practice with for a month to prepare their muscles for actual sex. Yes.
Yeah. That's very disconcerting.
Yeah. And then they are supposed to be initiated after a week of only eating bread, honey, and water,
So now they're starving
and then given a whole glass of mead
and drunk
and disrobed,
and disrobed.
and then removed from the circle with their sponsor to have sex.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's heavy.
Yeah. Gavin and Yvonne have been constantly questioned about this, saying, hey, what the hell? Let's just be honest. What the hell? And they'll either say things like, well, it was never intended to be actually done. In one statement, Gavin has said, well, that was how it used to work in the Church of Wicca, which means you've done it before with children. It's still in publication today. Other times that they've been asked, they will turn around and say, well, a man can't bathe his own children without being considered a sexual predator. So really, it's a lot of just deflection going on.
Mm-hmm.
With that, let's kind of talk about why sexual abuse is so easily seen in paganism. Obviously, we've seen it in other religions.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I think that we can see these lines being crossed or these lines being hazy or teachers using their ability to request or elicit sex from students is because we are a fertility religion, essentially. If you look at it down deep, we talk about sex and sexual things a lot in our religion.
Mm-hmm.
The maypole.
Yeah, that's pretty much the dance around, the prelude to sex.
The great rite.
Yeah.
So I believe that's one of the reasons why we get this, is that we're seeing a lot of it in the religion already, and teachers just take it maybe an inch too far. Maybe they don't realize that they're taking an inch too far. An account that I read from a very prominent name was that her teacher, her first teacher, would have sex with multiple students, and she believes it's because he didn't believe he was lovable, that the student had the power, not the teacher. The teacher always has the power. We know this in normal K through 12 school. This is why professors can't have relationships with students. It's the same with mystery religions.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have a lot of sexual connotation in our religions. So I think that's one of the reasons.
And that's yeah. I mean, it is something that could be misconstrued in the outer world, I guess is the best way to put it. But I mean, there's still rules and regulations that we follow when it comes to the act. You know, and that's just one of those things where, I mean, with the last ones that you were talking about with Frosts, that with a child,
Yes.
not a kid, a child. No, I don't see. I mean, at least in our community, I don't see anybody even wanting to do that type of thing.
And I don't think that it goes on as much as I might have made it sound. I think a lot of what we're seeing, as we already described, is adults and adults having issues with those boundaries.
Right.
That's why I ended with this one, is that it's the scariest and the strangest. I haven't read a whole lot about kids. Me personally, all of the time that I've read anything about somebody who is under 18 trying to be involved, parent consent and parent involvement was a constant.
Right.
Obviously, it was with the Reclaiming Group in San Francisco because they had the parents' number to automatically call and say, hey, don't let your kid out.
Yeah.
Talk to your kid about this person. I would hope that any teacher out there has that same idea. My book club, I refuse anybody under the age of 18 to come without parent consent, and parent consent has to be me talking to the parent.
Yeah.
I don't allow just a written form because I don't know who you are. I don't know your parents. I need to let them know we are talking about a religion. We are talking about witchcraft. And if they are under 16, they're not allowed at all. Now, if their parent is already here, if I know their parent personally, there's a little bit of a blur. We had a 15-year-old, but her parent is a Coven member.
Right.
That's completely different. I know her mom very well. If I didn't know her parents so closely, I wouldn't have allowed her to sit in. So I hope anybody aspiring to be a teacher listening agrees with that. Nobody too young. I mean, again, we're talking about some very sexual content. A 15-year-old's going to giggle when you say phallus. It's just nature.
Well, I mean, a almost 33-year-old is giggling when you say phallus.
Phallus.
Sorry, I have to bring the immaturity level down a little bit.
And this is why I didn't teach you.
Exactly.
But that's another thing. If you're already in a relationship with somebody, don't offer to teach them from the basic ground up. I'm sorry. It's a boundary for me in any future or past relationships. And if you have had a sexual relationship with someone in the past, you're probably going to have problems teaching them in the future.
Yeah.
They can be interested. You can lead them down the correct way or the way that you think is correct, but you shouldn't be their teacher.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree with that as well. It's because you're not just dealing with just a student teacher aspect. There's a physicality to it. There's a mental thing that happens when people have been in a relationship.
Right.
That it creates roadblocks and speed bumps when it comes to the learning and the teaching.
I agree. There's certain respects you have to give a teacher that you might not be able to if you're already in a relationship like that. And there's certain respects that a student is going to need for nurturing that maybe somebody who's already slept with them can't give. For even if, I mean, you know, little things about your spouse that you don't like, or your mate that you don't particularly like, or that you don't think they're as respectful of certain things, and that's going to annoy you, and it's going to make both relationships hard.
Yeah.
So I advise strongly against that.
No, and that's definitely something that I completely agree with you on.
So if you are looking for a teacher, some things you should look out for. Obviously, we already discussed, don't let them take credit for your hard work. Anybody who's going to take credit for any of your hard work, it should be the gods and you.
Yeah.
And if that's not how they're looking at it, bye.
Yeah, that's not a teacher. That's somebody who is essentially a facilitator and wants to take credit for everything that you do.
There is one thing I want to say. A lot of the older books will say don't take on a teacher who is charging. Sorry, it's 2018. Everybody has bills. You're going to get classes that charge. You're going to find teachers that charge specific rates. Now, it shouldn't be unfeasible. Also, I haven't met a single person who wasn't willing to move that based on your need. I have had people who do weekend getaways up in Sedona where food and board is paid for, and if you can't pay this amount of money, let me know.
Yeah.
That is big to me. When you're hosting it someplace far away and it's going to be an expense, and you saying, let's talk about it.
Yeah, that's another big thing with communication right there.
Right.
Yeah.
But you will see people charging. And like I said, it should not be astronomical. It should not be definitely not sex, obviously. I've heard some stories where it's like, oh, well, you have to do a sexual favor for me because I'm doing this. It also shouldn't be spells. Your teachers shouldn't be requiring you to do spells for them for your education. It also shouldn't be any service that they should pay for normally. Do not wash your teacher's car. Do not bring in their groceries unless you're just being nice.
Yeah.
Do not do services like wash their carpets. Granted, if you're a carpet washer and you can't pay their fee and they're like, well, wash my carpets once a month, that's your bargaining.
Yeah.
Bargaining happens in the pagan world, but if that's not your service that you're willing to give,
Yeah,
Don't do
don't
it.
give it. Yeah. I mean that's something. I mean, I have heard of people, doing trades for stuff like that. It's great to be able to have that in the community. I mean, there's things that people are a lot better at than some other people, and if they're willing to put forth the effort with something they're already good at, yeah, I mean that can be used as a form of payment as long as it's under mutual agreement.
Yep, I agree. Some things for teachers to consider is obviously if you're on a power trip, don't do it.
Yeah.
Another big one is if you can't take criticism. Another one is don't expect your students to become your family.
Mm-hmm.
If you are coven mates, then that's different. Be friends, have some sort of familial like connection to that person, but they're not your sister, brother, cousin when they're your teacher. They're your teacher.
Yeah.
A great resource for teachers is I have a book here that was given to me. I have not had the chance to read it, so I will caveat at that, but it was given to me by somebody I definitely respect who's a British traditional priest, and it's The Witch's Coven by Edan McCoy, Finding or Forming Your Own Circle. If you are raising children in the pagan world, Starhawk wrote a book called Circle Round. It might be a bit dated. I have not gotten to actually read it cover to cover, but it is a good resource for parents if you want to start a slow and healthy build into paganism. As a student, give us some advice.
I mean, honestly, for me, don't expect too much from your students. They're learning. They're still new to it. I mean, I know I've heard of and have seen people expecting great and grandiose things from a student that they've only been teaching a week.
True.
There's something to be said, when it comes to learning. I mean, it's like learning how to ride a bicycle or learning how to play the piano. Baby steps.
Also, if you got into paganism just to become a teacher, I know there's something really mystical and awesome about being a pagan teacher. A lot of us aspire to be full-time witches someday, myself included. But I never expected to be like a one-on-one teacher. In fact, I despise the idea of being a one-on-one teacher to the point where I was offering a course and I literally said, if there's not 3 people in this course a month ahead of time when I'm supposed to start it, I will not teach it. And I had one person who sent me a message, and what she was hoping to get out of this very basic introduction Wicca course, I was a little afraid of, and was like, okay, I will teach you one-on-one because, oh my goodness, we need to start in the basics if that's your aspiration.
Right. You gotta learn how to move a grain of sand before you can move a mountain.
Yes.
And here's a little word of advice to any teacher. Read your student, because if you try to teach them a specific way and it's not working for them, you should be able to see that. You should be able to try to accommodate for the student and their specific learning patterns.
And consistency.
Yes.
I've had it pretty good with my coven. I came in, they had an established set of books and time frames, and then I had another teacher who was like, oh, do this, oh, do that, oh, do this, maybe we should work on this. And it's like, I understand when you're a beginner, because obviously I would have been a beginner, you don't really know what you want to really accomplish, but don't throw them under 2 different buses at once.
Yeah, that's something that can greatly hinder somebody's learning.
And that's the same with students. Don't ask 3 million different questions for 3 million different types of magic or 3 different things. Have a goal.
Yeah.
And stick with it. If you're at level 1, don't ask a level 3 question. Or if you don't know it's a level 3 question, but you don't feel satisfied with the answer, realize that's probably why.
And I mean, for me, one of the big things is be patient. You know, there's a lot of students out there that, you know, maybe they're not 100% sure of why or what they want to learn, but if halfway through the class they just say I don't think I can continue with this, be patient with them. Maybe they'll get it, maybe they won't.
And if people back out, that's fine.
Yeah.
A spiritual path is just that. It's a path. It's not always going to be destination A, destination B. I think I've frustrated plenty of friends and co-pagans by how slow I'm taking mine, because I realize this is a lifelong journey.
Yeah.
And they're like, but initiate, but start a coven, but I'm like, I'm gonna stick over here in the 102 books.
Yeah. And that's perfectly fine. You know, you could be a lifelong pagan and never teach a class.
Or you could be a very initiate for 5 years, teaching, training, and then suddenly Judaism looks really fancy right now. I'm going to learn about that. Religion and spirituality, especially for pagans, is so fluid.
Yeah, it's all going to it's going to take you places that you've never been before, and places you never thought you were going to go, and you might not stay there, or you might set up camp.
And don't get mad at teachers for doing that. If your teacher changes their mind, that doesn't minimize what you've learned from them. Another recent issue with teachers, Doreen Virtue decided to walk a Christian path. And whereas a lot of people were like, good for her, her major upset was that she turned around. She's an author. She's published a lot of angel oracle cards and different oracle decks. And she said that all of that's of the devil. I don't want anything to do with it. I recant and take back everything I've ever done for the pagan community. And then she had on YouTube a very, creepy video of her and her new priest and her priest's wife in a house in Honolulu. A lot of people, I had some of my friends say that she looked possessed, and some of my friends say that she looked doped out of her mind.
I'm going to have to look at this video.
It's scary.
Yeah.
I was worried about her mental health, personally. I was wondering what had happened, but I also didn't know her ahead of time, had no affiliation with her other than hearing the name. I personally don't speak with or do anything with angels, and I'm a little weary of people who do. So that was kind of, watching that video was a little disgusting because of the way that she turned around and belittled the pagan community, a community that made her a millionaire. Let's just be honest.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was kind of terrifying. It was a little worrying if they were going to start a witch hunt. I mean, Scott Cunningham's group was in Hawaii. I'm a little worried about our Hawaiian friends with her there. Well, obviously that, and we have to throw a Cheeto in a volcano to quiet a volcano goddess.
That would actually be kind of nice. And,
right.
Yeah.
I was amused by those.
Yes.
Let's throw the orange Cheeto in and see if it appeases the goddess.
I do have to say, and this is just something, just because you did bring up Hawaii, just to anybody who is listening out there, be safe, just be careful. And, we're shooting out the vibes. We're doing what we can for you. We're
thinking about you.
Yeah.
And we also respect those who believe it is the anger of Pele. That's that's a research thing. Guys, go figure out who Pele is and why we're talking about her. I mean, I heard about her before this all happened, so she's out there in the sphere.
Yeah. But it's just something that, it's disasters like that really bring communities closer together, but it's not always for a good reason.
Right.
Right. But I just want to say, at least personally, I'm thinking about every person and every creature that's being affected by this, because this is something big, and the fact that it still has not stopped
Scary.
is very scary.
Especially after I just went to the Arizona Science Center, had a exhibit on Pompeii. And after being at Pompeii and then re-seeing some of these artifacts, how damaging an eruption can be. It took 48 hours for the entirety of history to lose Pompeii, a giant seaport. So, I mean...
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yep.
Yes.
I will say this, though. It has ended, so I'm sorry to spoil the exhibit for everyone. There was this beginning of the actual exhibit. You walk in and you see a lot of these artifacts that look very pristine, very cool, that they've dug out of Pompeii. Everything is clean, nice images and shows, little videos on how certain things were built, how certain things were done. And then you walk into this video room and you sit down, and it's literally a time lapse, and it's gorgeous quality, almost Assassin's Creed level graphics. It's gorgeous, with smoke and thunder and lightning going on in the room from that morning on. And you walk in, first you see quotations about how there was small earthquakes happening in the few days beforehand that were written down. And then you see a plume of smoke come out of Vesuvius. And just the slow arc of how it goes from a little earthquake to a bigger earthquake to this plume keeps getting closer and closer. And it looks almost like rain, but it's ash. And then the next one is all the ashes really heavy coming down. Certain buildings are on fire that you were looking at. The plume is coming closer. Then the ash stops falling like snow, and the rocks stop falling, and the plume is right there, right at the edge of the city. And everything's already caught on fire and burnt. And things have already fallen, and then this plume just comes, and then it comes to the next morning, and you can't see any of the buildings.
Oh, wow.
Because of how much ash had fallen. That's why we lost it, because the river that was used to access Pompeii was then filled. The entire town was covered. To this day, parts of the actual city of Pompeii are resting under a resort, because people didn't know what was there. And then you walk in, you see the actual casts, and how they found bodies was they knew there was biological material there at one point, but a lot of it had dissolved and hardened around the ash. So they poured cast in. Yeah,
like resin molding and stuff like that.
And so then they could carve it away, and they saw what the person was. And there was 2 casts specifically, the actual ones that the archaeologists got at this exhibit that I saw in Pompeii when I was there. They were behind wrought iron and plexiglass. At the Arizona Science Center, they were just on tables. And I was just like, those are actual pieces of history, and I could touch them, but it says don't. So, I behaved.
Thank you for respecting the sign.
Yes. I'm a sign respecter. It's half of my job.
That is true. That is true.
So, I think we've hashed it out, gotten it all out, a little bit of volcano knowledge.
Like we said before, we know this episode was a little bit on the heavy side. For anybody who, we did trigger, we're sorry. But
let us know if you've experienced anything and you want to talk to us. Come out and give us a little bit more information. Let us know if we need to be a little bit more respectful. Again, I'm sorry. I'm very desensitized.
Yeah, and I mean I'm desensitized too, but that's just because of who I am. But for anybody out there, if you guys do want to share your opinions, if you do want to share your stories with us, if you guys just want to leave a comment, feel free to do so. We're here, we're listening. We do want to read what you guys are thinking, what you guys want to say to us. So feel free to shoot us a message on Facebook or any of our social medias, or even just leave us a message on our Facebook page.
Yep, this is a discussion.
Yeah.
So, anyway, events that are coming up.
Yes.
Tonight is the full moon, which means everyone's going to be listening to this and going, yesterday was the full moon, guys. Come on. Or more days.
Yeah.
The 2nd of June is going to be the next volunteer meeting for Arizona or Phoenix Pagan Pride. You can find that on Pagan Pride's Facebook. So it would be Phoenix Pagan Pride. And like I said, the 2nd is for volunteers. The 5th is the next meeting of Book Talk Phoenix Valley at Changing Hands Bookstore in Tempe. And that's about it for current events.
Mm-hmm.
So our Patreon thank yous. We want to give a huge thank you to Leandra.
Yes, thank you, Leandra, for supporting us.
And all of your likes. Everyone else, please drop us a hint, and please do join us on Patreon. Any little bit helps, most definitely, especially now that we're trying to gear up and get ready for Pagan Pride.
Yes.
We also have some really great incentives.
Yeah, of course, for everybody who does donate, even if it's just $1 a month to our Patreon. Of course, you get a big thank you from us.
Mm-hmm.
For anybody who donates $5 or more, you do get a special Patreon exclusive mini-sode, which we will be recording again here shortly.
Yes.
For the next month. So make sure you guys keep your eyes and ears out for that. And we really haven't gone anywhere above that yet.
No, not really.
Not yet.
We might start looking into it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think $5 a month is extremely generous in my book. So,
yeah. And also there is also another way you guys can also help support us. I will be posting a link to our Amazon wish list. We have a couple of things on there that we're looking at getting for Pagan Pride, specifically a canopy tent,
right,
and a couple of weights to keep that down. And of course, currently we only have 2.5 microphones. But we are looking to hopefully get some more. I do have a couple of really nice ones on there. Not all that expensive, but just a small donation will help us get those. And of course, one of the big items that we're looking to get is an audio recorder for when we're on the go, so we don't have to lug around too much equipment.
Right.
Just something that we can literally sit down and if we're at an event, we can have an interview with somebody just right on the little handheld recorder that we can also use to record our big shows on as well.
And we're hoping eventually to start looking into advertising materials, because once we do get out to Pagan Pride, we do want a nice banner so people know who we are. And of course, handouts and some cards would be lovely. If you know of a company that's Pagan run in the Phoenix area, or even not, that's willing to help us out with that, please let us know as well. And we're hoping, if we're lucky enough, we might get all this stuff out early so that we can go to an event in October. But I have not gotten the details on that yet. So, spoilers, if you help us out early, you might see us sooner.
I like that.
If you are listening only through links that you find on Facebook and Twitter, please note that we are on Podbean, iTunes, and SoundCloud. You can drop us a like, subscribe on any of those three, Podbean, iTunes, and SoundCloud.
And we're actually just one episode away from getting on Spotify as well.
Ooh, Spotify.
Yeah.
You can find the pod on Patreon, Twitter, Facebook, and through our email. Patreon, Twitter, and Facebook, obviously, our Millennial Pagan Podcast or Millennial Pagan Pod. The email is millennialpaganpod@gmail.com. You can find me, Autumn Wolf, on Facebook at Autumn Wolf with an E on the end of Wolf. Twitter at Autumn Iron Wolf with no E. And WordPress, which is my blog, which is Iron Wolf Circle. You could also look through Autumn Wolf with an E on the end to get that. And I believe somebody, just drumroll please, got himself a new Twitter.
That's like number 4 on my Twitter accounts.
I don't know how you do that.
I know. It's pretty simple once you have the right app for it. Ding. But if you guys do want to follow me on there, I haven't really set it up too much right now. It's just kind of something in the works. But you can go ahead and look me up on there at Jera Stone, JERASTONE. All one word.
Well, merry meet.
Merry part.
And merry meet again.